Hello, everyone. I hope you had a great lunch. This is Tim Moore. We're just about at 1 o'clock, and I know folks are probably trickling back in just a little bit. So in just a moment, we will turn the microphone over to Aaron Engenes, who's part of our event planning team, to introduce our first afternoon speaker, who's Steve Wagner. So in just a moment, we'll turn it over to Aaron. And Steve, if you're on now, see if you can try to share your slides, make sure that functionality is working. And I see a comment in the chat about the screen being black. Right now, there's no content being shared. We're waiting for our afternoon speaker to see if he can share his slides. And I don't know if he's on quite yet. So Steve, if you are on and you're having any difficulty sharing, send a message in the chat and we'll see if we can troubleshoot.
Tim, I don't think Steve is on yet. So okay. I was looking to see if he joined the attendee side rather than the panelist, but I don't see him.
Oh, sure. Okay. We've got some dead air to fill, and I don't have any jokes prepared.
What's your take on the MLB lockout, Tim?
That's a great question. It's sad, but being a St. Paul resident, I'm heartened that the St. Paul Saints are open for business. Tickets are on sale, and opening day is not far away. So for those of you who want really high quality baseball, AAA level now in St. Paul, that's a team really worth watching, and a stadium worth going to if you haven't been.
That's a good call, and a chance to run into Bill Murray in real life.
Absolutely. And Lin-Manuel Miranda's cousin was playing for the Saints last year and really doing well. So I was disappointed to see spring training canceled so far, because I thought he had a real shot at making the Twins. But if he's back in St. Paul, he's worth the price of admission all by himself.
I might take that advice, Tim. You might see me there this summer here.
They have all sorts of kind of interesting creative seating options at the Saints that you won't find at a major league ballpark. I got the email yesterday for the front porch swing seats at the Saints Stadium, which it truly is an actual rocker type swing, and you can reserve that seat for an entire game, which is kind of neat.
That sounds super fun. That sounds really fun. I haven't been anywhere in 2 years, so I feel like an outdoor ballpark is a great place to start hanging out with crowds, maybe.
It is. It's a good spot. Any sign of Steve yet? Or Aaron, I wonder if you have a...
Yeah, I was just texting him to see if maybe he couldn't find his link or what the holdup is. The life of a assistant principal, I'm sure, is never dull.
He might have gotten a crisis right before 1 o'clock. You just never know. I wonder if our afternoon panelists, if everyone's here, would it be possible to flip-flop these sessions and have our afternoon 2 o'clock session take the 1 o'clock slot? I see Jody is here. I think Jody, if I'm seeing your name, I assume you're here. That Jody and Hillary are here. Liz is here.
I'm just looking. We have Heather,
for Nicole.
Jody, Nicole. You would need Nicole.
Mm-hmm. And we could certainly go in a different order, but she's not here yet. We don't want to assume that she will be here before 2.
I can text her and see if she'd be available to start now.
Well, that'd be great, Trista.
Great flexibility from this positive behavior support crew. One thing I will for attendees really quick. So we are in the webinar format. So as presenters are going today, if you have questions, you won't be able to unmute or share your video, but any questions and things that you have, you can go ahead and put them in the chat or the Q&A. And then the presenters will either let us know that they want to wait till the end for questions, or we'll answer them as we go. So do feel free to put things in the chat.
I just get an email from Steve that he's running into technical difficulties and their internet went down.
Oh, no. Well, maybe we should go ahead and get started with the 2 o'clock panel. If Trista, you've gotten any word back from Nicole, we could kind of launch in and just get started with the first talk. If Jody and Heather, are you able to unmute?
Yep, I'm definitely available to go whenever is needed.
Yes, I am as well, Tim. Thanks.
Great.
Yep.
Well, maybe we could just kind of, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, let's just give Steve one more minute just in case he might not be available later, is what
That's
I'm
true.
thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just give him just a minute if that's all right, and see if he can get on here.
Sure can. On the plus side of technology, my video now works. So I'm able to say hello beyond just my name on a black screen. So hello, everyone. And thanks for bearing with us. We made it through an entire morning without any technical difficulty. So that's saying something. We've all been to enough of these now where we're used to some technical glitch at most mileposts along the way, right? Is anyone on the call planning to go to APBS in San Diego? That conference is coming up in just about a month.
I will be attending on the virtual option. San Diego would be nicer, but I'll take the virtual option.
I'm in your camp. I'll be in the same boat.
I was wondering, since we're killing a little time, looking at the participant list, because this includes a lot of people that I normally wouldn't see in my circle of work, if we could just have people maybe put in the chat like what your role is. I think it's really interesting to see all the people we've brought together today.
That's a great idea, Aaron. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names and some I'm really curious to know where they're coming from. School psychologists, school-based BAs. All right, and while folks are posting, is there any word back yet from Steve about a change in status, or should we go ahead with the 2 o'clock panel?
I'm not seeing anything. Let's go ahead. We gave him a good couple of minutes here, and I think we have everybody for our panel. So let's get going with that.
All right. So I believe, Liz, you've got the full PowerPoint deck, and you're going to kick us off with just a brief introduction to the.
I do, and it sounds like Nicole is logging on right now. So Trista, if you can just let her know, I might miss her for introduction. So when I get to her slides, if she wants to introduce herself a little bit, that would be great. But we'll start here. I'll just start to share here. All right. Great. So I just have a harder time seeing the chat. So Erin, if there's anything that pops up, let me know. And I'll do my best here. So hi, everybody. My name is Liz Hari Dennis. And I don't know, do you need my video on here at all? I don't know what's better. So my name is Liz Hari Dennis. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and I work at the Minnesota Department of Human Services. Today, we've got a couple other folks presenting on some actual success stories that I'm really excited more for them to talk than for myself. But I'm just going to do a quick introduction here. We're all going to be talking about alternatives to punishment, and I'm going to start with a little introduction on why punishment doesn't work. And this is something that Jody, who's going to be presenting today, and I co-authored a while back, and we've presented to case managers and a couple other groups about alternative to punishments and why punishment doesn't work. Can everybody see slides okay?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, we're good. Okay, I just want to double check. So like I said, my name is Liz Hari Dennis. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and I've been with the Minnesota Department of Human Services for 5 years now. And Jody, if you want to pop on and do a quick introduction.
Sure. My name is Jody Cushman-Purcell. I am one of the board certified behavior analysts that work with the Successful Life Project, also in DHS. I've been with the state, I can't even believe it, Tim, but it's almost 8 years now. And I'm grateful to be part of the presentation today and excited to talk about some success stories. So thanks.
All right, and we're waiting on Nicole. Heather.
All right. Hi there. I'm Heather Wilford. I am also a board certified behavior analyst. I work for Mainsville Services, which is a home and community-based service provider. And then within that, we also have a wellness department. So my main role there is working as a positive support professional within that team.
All right, thanks, Heather. And it sounds like Nicole is on. Nicole, thanks for joining us with the change of schedule here. Do you want to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, hi, my name is Nicole Kelly, and I'm a board certified assistant behavior analyst working at the Southwest West Central Service Cooperative, working in the Educational Learning Centers, which is a school-based program.
Well, I'm so excited to have you all here today, and I can't wait to hear you talk. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to set the stage here a little bit for us. Some key points throughout all these presentations today. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what is punishment. I'm going to do a very quick overview of the history of positive supports in Minnesota, mostly from the perspective of legislation, because that's kind of my wheelhouse. Tim gave an overview of everything else that's going on. So I've got a different view on history here. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about why we don't use punishment. And then our presenters are going to talk about alternatives. So we're going to show rather than tell today, which I'm very excited about. So what is punishment? Well, the first time I gave this talk, it was to a room of direct support professionals, some of whom were refugees, and they let me know punishment absolutely does work. Coercion, intimidation, and violence all have an effect in controlling people, but I want to acknowledge that abuse does occur, and there are bad people out there who try to control and manipulate others, but it's not the kind of punishment that I'm talking about today. The kind of punishment I'm talking about today is the kinds of ways that well-intentioned people try to keep people from harming themselves or others. What I mean about that, when I say that, is when we talk generally about challenging or unhealthy behaviors, we talk about wanting to stop it. Stop throwing chairs, stop hitting, stop smoking. We're talking about how to regain control over a person's behavior. And this is just how we talk about behavior in our culture, right? We're so used to, you do a bad thing, we're going to try to get you to stop it. And when we talk about punishment generally like this, we're usually talking about implementing a consequence to get someone to stop doing something, right? We give them, you're speeding, we give you a speeding ticket. You commit a crime, you go to jail. You don't pay your credit card bills, we lower your credit score. We do these things as a society because some of these behaviors are dangerous, and we're hoping that this punishment influences the person and others' behaviors, right? As a society, we want to make certain behaviors less likely. We want everybody to be safe. We want everybody to get along. But that's what makes it hard to have a conversation about why it doesn't work, especially when I'm talking to support teams, is that it seems reasonable. There are times when we choose punishment because it's a part of our culture. We do put criminals in jail, right? And this is the conversation that I have with folks when they're wanting to implement certain procedures, is they tell me they have to do this because things are so bad. You know, they're desperate. This is where we need to, because otherwise someone's going to get hurt. It doesn't mean that a behavior is okay if we don't use punishment. And there's other ways that we can support people that don't include having harsh consequences, taking away their rights, or living in restrictive environments. And I'm really excited for people to talk about that today. So today I'm going to go into a few reasons why this isn't the case specifically for providing supports to people in the community. I'm really excited to hear what everybody else has to say. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how this conversation has gone historically. We've been having this conversation in the state of Minnesota since 1949, when Governor Luther Youngdahl went and took all the straitjackets outside of the Noka State Hospital and had a huge bonfire, which to me is just radical. And I can't believe he did this, but he was like, no, we're not treating people with mental illness like this. But what do you think happened? I'm going to open up the chat. What do you think happened the next day? Feel free to put it in the chat. Increases psychotropic medications, increase in physical restraints. They were all back. Allison wins. They were all back. Some of the nurses hid some of them. Yep. And people got hurt. All of the above. Some of the nurses hid some of them, and they came back the very next day out of nowhere. He didn't catch all of them. And so as we've gone on through the history of the state of Minnesota, we've tried and tried and tried to institutionalize this use of positive supports through and move beyond these restrictive procedures through changes in our laws. So here's just a sampling. This doesn't include environments such as education and a couple others, but more home and community-based services. This is my timeline for those. So the Welsh Consent Decree in 1975-87, we had Rule 40, where we really had to give a justification for using aversive and deprivation procedures. In 2008, we had the Jensen lawsuit with the ombudsman's report about that, and saying, you know, this just isn't working, and it's just plain wrong how people are being treated up in Meadow. In 2011, we finalized the Jensen settlement agreement, and the positive supports rule went into effect in 2015, and that's the area that I currently work in. And now there's current changes, like we're expanding some of those pieces of the positive supports rule into EEI DBI services. And so it's been a long journey, and I think all along the way it's been, you know, a couple steps forward and a couple steps back. But so why is this so important? Why are we doing this? And why does it matter in service provision and supporting people in the community? Why does punishment not work? Why can't we use straitjackets? Why can't we use seclusion and restraint? Why can't we use these things that we used to do? We used to do this. Why can't we do it? It's the question I get all the time. It's because it only teaches you what not to do. What happens when you're trying to serve someone with a disability or serious and persistent mental illness is you get a whack-a-mole effect. You know, you say, don't throw chairs, and they say, I'm not throwing chairs. You didn't say anything about plates. I'm going to throw plates. We're not actually treating the core of what's going on with that person when we're just saying, don't. What we've done is we've taught them to look for where the hole is in the system. I worked with someone where, her team was trying to tell her she couldn't have people over to the house because the people she was having over to the house were unsavory characters. So she left the house and went to go meet those folks in other places. And what we learned that didn't work about that is we were trying to teach her to tolerate an intolerable environment, and we don't do that anymore. And I'm really excited for the stories that people are going to share in a little bit, because I think they're examples of how we don't teach people to tolerate intolerable environments. I think the other piece about this is what we learned in the last 60 years is that we can re-traumatize a person. Some, quote unquote, challenging behaviors might be a trauma response. And if we're just talking about stopping it, if we're just talking about applying a consequence, we're not asking, the right questions. We're asking what's wrong with you and not what happened to you. And we're not helping that person, and we're just risking further harm. So we've looked, when we look at the whole person and what's happened to them, we find out that there's better ways that we can support them and reduce harm and reduce the risk of re-traumatizing people. The other piece about this, if we're just applying consequences to stop the behavior, we're not trying to understand that person and what's going on with them, we miss that behavior tells a story. A person might be trying to tell us something very important with their behavior. Are they in pain? Do they feel safe? What's going on with their quality of life? Punishment might mask really important information. Uncovering our patterns, understanding what's going on with people, understanding the patterns that their behavior, understanding what their behavior is telling us by decoding it gives a better sense of what's going on with that person and is at the core of finding out alternatives that work. We need to find out why a person does what they do before we can figure out how to support them. And if we're just applying consequences really willy-nilly, trying to stop a person from doing something, we miss out on understanding that. So taking context into consideration is more likely to address the real issue. It's more likely to have long-lasting change. It's more likely to support that person long-term and support that person in getting what they want out of life without using an interfering behavior to communicate what's going on in their life. So I'm going to end it up here, but I'm just going to have you guys, I got a chance to see everybody's slides, but as people are presenting, I just want you to kind of pay attention to how these amazing clinicians organize their work and pay attention to where did they help, where did the person that they serve have buy-in? Where did they get the buy-in from the person who is being affected by these supports, who is being supported? And where did they have a voice in what was happening here? Because they did a lot of work to be able to do that. And I think that's what made these stories successful. I think they also did a lot of work in figuring out what the person's behavior is telling them about what's going on. They did a lot of work to set up that environment for success. And they did some tests to see if they did the right thing and they checked their work. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jody.
Thanks, Liz. Wow. So we've got a lot of things to talk about. I have a very short amount of time, so I know I'm probably going to miss something. And so please feel free to, put in the chat a question if you have. I think we're going to wait until the end of all of these presentations, though, to address those questions. So without any further ado, let me get started on my story. I have so many stories that I could tell, but I figured I wanted to talk about Betty today just because her story is so dramatic, the difference between then and now. And I think that story is told in her numbers. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But some background information about Betty. She had been living in an ICFDD, in other words, an intermediate care facility for folks with developmental disabilities. Betty was, it wasn't something that she chose. This was a placement that was assigned to her because of her challenging behaviors. And unfortunately, she does have had an extensive history of aggression towards staff, herself, and others. Looking at some of the information I have here, it describes the ICFDD a little bit. She shared a house with 7 other individuals. There were 3 staff on during the day, and then there'd be, as kind of the night settled in, there'd just be 1 awake staff in that house. Other staff would be available if there was some sort of need, but again, just kind of giving you an overview of kind of what it looks like. They primarily utilize stuff like scheduling, sort of those tier 2 supports that we think about to help give Betty a meaningful day. She went to a day program and participated in as many activities as she could at the house. Her diagnosis was moderate to severe cognitive impairment. Betty has a full-scale IQ of 45. And through the years, she's got a few different diagnoses as well that show up in her records, but primarily the one we see more often is the intermediate explosive disorder. Few other things that I wanted to point out. So not only does Betty have this extensive history of aggression towards herself and others, but she also has a very extensive trauma history. And without going into any of the details there, just know that unfortunately, you know, we know that people who are victims of trauma often have some really challenging behaviors, especially aggressive type behaviors. Also, we weren't sure if she had a brain injury as a child. She did suffer some seizure activity. So again, we don't know if that's what caused this cognitive impairment. Nonetheless, you know, you meet the person where they're at, and just know that her programs, they were trying to work with her where she was at. She also had some history of stomach troubles and gastrointestinal bleeding. She, again, like I said, primarily at this point was receiving those tier 2 supports. So I've chosen, again, some numbers to kind of tell the rest of her story. So if we could go to the next slide. And I know this is a really busy slide. For those of you who are familiar with these kind of line graphs, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but I just thought it kind of shows the story with, you know, just this one visual. I'll explain a few pieces of it. So I chose to use behavior incident reports as sort of our means to measure how well she was doing. And these reports are generated because a specific intervention was utilized towards specific behavior, right? So you can see that starting in 2013, they started doing these reports. It didn't mean those are the first incidents of Betty engaging in this or them doing various interventions to help her, but it's when we started using this report. And then the last date on there is February of this year. You can see a few phase lines that I've added to kind of give a little bit of a context of what was going on with the way they were responding to Betty and her challenging behavior. So the first one is when the positive supports rule was put in place. And I put that in there because previous to that, they were using seclusion more often than use of manual restraint. So like I said, I just wanted to point that out. But as of that date, they were no longer able to use that intervention. So the rest of these primarily are when an emergency use of manual restraint was needed. And this was a procedure that staff had been carefully trained on, and they administered it only if there was imminent risk to the safety or harm, I should say, imminent risk of harm to others or herself. So again, we're not talking about just many challenging behaviors that may occur at different times during the day. We're talking about some very serious occurrences. And as you'll notice, as we progressed into that sort of 2015 to 2018 timeframe, there's a lot of variability in her data. The team tried many different kinds of approaches to work within the confines of this ICFDD. But unfortunately, we really came to that point where, doggone it, this is not the right setting for her. She really did need some more of that one-to-one kind of staff work with her. And also at that point, there was no real skill building in any of the programs they were doing with her, other than making sure she'd brush her teeth and take a shower. And I'm not belittling that. I'm just saying that there really wasn't skill building in some of the areas that she really was needing some help in. So the team made the decision to move her to a crisis home, and that's the next set of phase lines there. During her stay in a crisis home, we were able to more systematically trying to kind of figure out what was going on with her and what were things that were triggering her. We discovered some patterns to her behavior. So we noticed, for example, about 80% of these incidents occurred between 7 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. So we were able to take a deeper dive into what was going on during that time of the day and try and implement a few things that were then, eventually successful. I'll get to that. The other thing that we noticed is that she was very opportunistic. So if there, and this is the way I'm using some of the language from both the past and her staff, as soon as staff would turn their back, she'd be out the door and taking her clothes off and running down the street. So we know that having other chaos around her or some other people that might be engaging in some other challenges at that time were definitely, a context for things to kind of go in the wrong direction for our friend Betty. So eventually,
Jody, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to stop you before you went. There's a question in the chat, and I think I know the answer to this, but it says, curious why they chose ICF placement. That alone could be a huge context due to program requirements.
You're absolutely right. And that is one of the points that I'm trying to make here. You're right. But, at the time, this was the best placement that the team could find for her. Again, she had a serious history of aggression towards herself and others. And one of the things that an ICF can provide is that structure and these staff that are trained in some really specific interventions like EMUR. So I think, again, it's the different in our time now, right? Like now we know this. Then, the team didn't know that. And they were trying to keep her out of the hospital, which was the other kind of alternative. So I know it wasn't the best maybe choice looking at it long term like this, but if we were in the moment with the team, this was the best option they had for her at the time. So hopefully that answers your question. You're welcome. Okay. So the other thing that we noticed was, I think, knowing that her behaviors would escalate around this certain time of day, there were some other things that also happened during that time of day. And one of them was food preparation. And again, no fault to the staff or anything. Everybody's doing what they need to do, but being around smelling food, being prepared, being around staff preparing food became a very unfortunate antecedent to some of her behaviors. So one of the things we learned was that, we need to try and figure out how we can create this environment so that Betty is much more successful. And then that last phase line on there is when we moved Betty to her now single site apartment where she has one-to-one staff. They still are trained in EMUR, but as you notice, they've only needed to use it once. And the context there was a really sad time when mom was unable to come on a day that they had planned for an outing for Betty. So it was a rough day, but that's the only blip we've seen in 3.5 years. So let's take a look at kind of some of the other things, Liz, on my next slide that kind of talk about how this huge change happened for Betty. So again, as I said, that single site with the one-to-one staffing. So it's all about her. You'll notice she's got she's very proud of her artwork. She's got some artwork there displayed for us. And even her most recent creation there is her mom's gift for Mother's Day. Very enriched environment. She loves music. She loves to dance. And anytime she wants to, she can participate in these kind of things. Again, they don't do any food preparation in this apartment. It's all done at an apartment down the hall. And her food shows up already portioned, cut up, and so on. So she just can sit and enjoy a meal when it comes. She does have food in her kitchen, but it's all just healthy snacks that she can have whenever she wants, and beverages and so on. But a huge key here was increasing these skills. Again, Betty had a 45 full-scale IQ, so she didn't have a lot of speech. She had a few words that she could say. They've been working on expanding her vocabulary, and not necessarily that she has to enunciate everything perfectly, but it's more like working on that functional communication. She can advocate for herself if she's got a tummy ache, or if she's not feeling like she wants to do something. She's got a way to talk to staff about things that she does want to do. And they've been working with her on right now, looking at photographs of some of the favorite places she likes to go to, and she gets to help put her schedule together for every day. They had to back out a bunch of the activities and so on they were doing with her because they never knew if Betty was going to be taken off on the bus and so on. So now, slowly again, systematically, they've started adding back in a lot more of these activities where she can be on outings with her peers. And she's very proud to show you her library card and excited that she gets to go to the YMCA. So they've been working back up again with bringing some of these community outings and activities back into things that she's doing daily. And the biggest, I guess, success, I think, on this team has been this increased rapport and trust building that they've been doing with her. So as she learns more how to communicate, they're able to meet her needs, and that just kind of feeds that naturally. She has now increased access to her family, which has been huge, working with her mom and working on ways to get them together and go on outings. And finally, she loves a good mani-pedi, and they have her on a regular schedule of getting her nails done and her hair done and things, like I said, that she has access now to that really make that huge difference in her feeling worthwhile, feeling like she's part of a community. She knows all the people at the salon. She knows the people at the YMCA. She's gotten to know more of the peers that she lives with in this apartment building and so on. And so where Betty was when I first met her and where she is today, I mean, it's night and day. And you can really see this, not me, but all the hard work of the staff that work with her and all that TLC that has been added into her day and how Betty is thriving today. So thanks. Really appreciate being able to share this story. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you, Jody. And I think you have to take credit for some of that work too. I know I've seen this person's journey, and it's incredible, the work that you guys have done. So Heather, I have you next. I'm going to let you share here.
All right, thank you. I had to be the pain that had a lot of animation, so I wasn't going to have Liz sit and click over them over and over.
No problem.
Let me go into share. All right, so I'm just going to kind of kick it off very similar to kind of the exact same things that Jody was touching on. So you'll probably see a lot of overlap with those, which is a good thing. So I'll just kind of get into it. Like I said, a lot of overlap. I kind of wanted to throw this up here as a really good quote. I think that really starts off and explains a lot of what this team did. So nothing of significance was ever achieved by an individual acting alone.
Sorry, Heather, we're only seeing your PowerPoint window. We're not seeing a slide being shared.
Got it. I will try one more time. Is that working now?
There we go.
Okay,
Thank
perfect. So nothing of significance was ever achieved by an individual acting alone. Look below the surface and you will find that all seemingly solo acts are really team efforts. So I just really wanted to start out, anytime you hear me say we or our or even the word I, this really was a huge collaborative effort. We're still working with this wonderful woman, but really members from DHS, from the external review committee, I'd say like Stacey Enders and Stacey Danoff specifically, you both have been wonderful to help our team. Members of Mainzel, both in leadership roles, direct support roles, wellness team, and even her case manager, her family, her friends. Really, it's been a huge collaborative effort. So I kind of go in and speak to the context of the person that I'm speaking about. So she is a wonderful woman, but there was a lot of stuff coming in to support her that we really had to get to know from the get-go. So first of all, she had a long history of trauma. So there's kind of alleged sexual abuse from a very close caregiver, as well as physical abuse from both family and staff that had worked with her. So this is really a big piece of the information that we started to get. On top of that, there was a restraining order because of the alleged sexual abuse with that family member. She also had multiple different diagnoses, both medical and kind of mental health related. So the biggest one is called Phelan-McDermid syndrome. And so I had no idea what this was coming in. It's actually a pretty rare neurodegenerative disease or disorder. And so essentially the best way to explain it, that the genetics teams have explained it to us and that our team has talked about, is that a lot of the skills that she has developed or will develop can often deteriorate just based on how her brain is working in the moment. On top of that, she also had multiple different diagnoses. And I think the best way to describe them would be that they potentially could be incongruent. So we had multiple different psychiatrists or professionals diagnosing different things with her. So she was diagnosed with PTSD at some point, autism spectrum disorder, bipolar that was non-specified. I'm trying to think, that was all of them. I believe that was all of them off the top of my head. But we definitely had concerns whether some of those were kind of the symptoms are shared with some of those different diagnoses. She also came to live in the Mainzel house with a restricted procedure in place that was first kind of used by her family members. She engaged in pretty extensive self-injurious behavior. So she would hit her head pretty significantly. And so her family, the way that they kind of worked through that was by putting these soft kind of boxing gloves on her hands whenever she would do that. She also had a history of multiple different hospitalizations, so for different reasons, as well as going to different hospitals throughout kind of the metro region. On top of that, they had never really received any of the supports that we're talking about today. So in hearing the different stories with Colin this morning, and I believe, I'm trying to remember her other son's name, I think it was Maxwell, kind of those stories about how they got support pretty early on and kind of focused a lot on this prevention and skill building from an early age. This woman really didn't have that support until she got older and kind of started working with us. She had a history of family caregiver that came in as a PCA, and they kind of used the CDCS waiver that way. But prior to this, we really didn't have a lot of information or like an FBA that was already done or anything that they had worked on as far as like skill building using anything like ABA or therapy or anything like that. There was also a history of multiple different MARC reports. So that's both on kind of the employment side of things or as caregiver side of things, as well as family members. There was also a history, I think a lot going into this, a lot of history with different providers that were used. So multiple different medical providers, multiple different psychiatrists, just a lot of different professionals kind of had their hands in the pot, kind of trying to support this person and her family. And then kind of the piece with that is that oftentimes we would get kind of different information from different professionals. And then the main caregiver had a hard time really kind of following through with them. The best way to describe it is kind of had these idealized outcomes in place that they were really working towards, that multiple professionals were saying like that we professionally don't think this is how it's going to work out. And because of that, the caregiver would kind of stop using that professional and then kind of move to someone else. And then the last one here, I think many of us on the provider side of things can relate to this, and that's kind of the turnover. So coming in, we had a turnover with our employees at Mainzel. So that includes both leadership and kind of direct care roles. So that was also a huge context and a huge barrier. So, when I'm talking about all these variables coming in the context and supporting this woman, I want everyone to kind of think in their head, how would they kind of initially define success in supporting this person and their team? So would it be something like decreasing her self-injurious behavior, trying to remove that restricted procedure of the gloves, a decrease in incidents that could meet the level of maltreatment, collaboration for concurrent diagnoses and medical care, an increase in typical sleep patterns. So I didn't really share, but part of Phelan-McDermid syndrome is just very erratic sleep patterns, or a decrease in hospitalizations. Is anyone feeling overwhelmed yet? Because I will say, in coming in and working with the team, I felt very overwhelmed at first and often questioned myself if I had the ability to really support this team. So we'll kind of get into, I'm going to just show this very briefly. And so this is kind of what we looked at as a team of her data. We would meet weekly and share this with multiple different team members. But this is really to show the hard work that the DSPs and the manager that worked with this team really put into it, and the SC, which is kind of like just the different people supporting on the direct side of things. So we did partial interval recording. So if it was like for each hour chunk, if she slept during that hour time span, I think we put like 5 seconds or more, they would mark that as yes, she slept during that time span. We also took data on her self-injurious behavior, her glove use, and then aggression that would take place. And I just wanted to show this too, as you can see all these different phase lines when I was talking about, follow through not always happening. Lots of changes were always happening that we were having kind of a difficult time figuring out, what's happening, what's changing at what, and kind of that whole control factor was really difficult to kind of get in place. And so just to kind of see this from a greater lens, kind of a macro level, this is over the months time span. And so, like I said, I won't get too deep into this, but essentially I want to show there really wasn't a huge change. So we would kind of see change, sleep here, 8 hours. And when we're saying 8 hours, that's maybe like 2 hours here, 2 hours here, 5 hours here. And then so we saw, a pretty decent level of that behavior. And then we would see kind of swoops where it would decrease. Within these, there were multiple hospitalizations. I think I would have phase lines kind of all across this if I really included them. But same with self-injurious behavior, we would kind of see, yeah, things are going really good. Oh, no, they're not. And then we had a hospitalization. Things started to be, okay, we're seeing a little bit of level here. And then boom, things got really kind of went downhill, and then a hospitalization again. And then use of the restricted procedure, the gloves, it was like, yay, this is going awesome. She's doing so well. Oh no, maybe not. And another hospitalization. Oop. So, you look at these graphs, and myself as a behavior analyst, I'm like, this is not successful. Like, I often question ethically, like, am I doing all that I can? Should I be supporting this person? So this was me. The problem with your recent solutions is they don't fit my preconceived notions of the problems. So that was me sitting here being like, something's not right here. And that's really where I get into the real process. So we look at that discrete data and kind of our preconceived notions of what success would look like for this person. And my head really had to be flipped around in working with this team. So, she did have increased hospitalizations, but really what that led to was slow movement to adequate support and an increase in increase in collaboration. So increase in working with the case manager, working with the family, working with the physicians that were at the hospital, getting her different therapies because now she was in the hospital and they were seeing that there was more support needed. We had continued MARC reports. Once again, this led to an increase in collaboration and support from the entities that are there for the reason. So I know a lot of us, we view the ombudsman as like, oh no, they're coming in, they're watching everything we're doing, this is scary, but they're there for a reason. And that was a huge asset to really helping us all get on the same page at our weekly meetings. The continued PSTP. So what that is the positive support transition plan. So anyone that uses kind of those restrictive procedures. So in her case, her gloves are considered mechanical restraint. You have to have kind of a plan in place for how you're going to teach skills to try to get rid of that restrictive procedure over time. And so we still have that in place. If you would have asked me, almost 2 years ago, if that would have still been in place, would you think this was successful? I would have said, of course not. But it is. And really what that's led to is continued oversight. Like I talked about kind of the committee that's continuing to watch, the way that we're approaching things and telling us like, yeah, I agree. This is a great way to do it. Or, hey, maybe think about looking at it a different way. It's also led to a slow transition from that restricted procedure. So coming in, really looking at what is the function of using these gloves and are they really aversive for her? Or is it something that she might actually view as a comfort item in times when she's feeling either like out of control or not being able to control her self-injurious behavior? Limited change in sleep. Once again, looking at those graphs, you're like, there was no change in sleep. And really that was us having better partnership with genetics to really talk with them and know that, no, this is really a biological effect. There's not a lot of environmental things that you can do to really combat that biology. That's really just part of what the Phelan-McDermid syndrome is going to do. And then continued lack of follow through. So, in working with this specific caregiver, we still were seeing lack of follow through for months. And really what that led us to do is really change our approaches, really work on partnership collaboration, and really figuring out what's going to work for this family and understanding, kind of the history of trauma with the entire family, not viewing it as we're supporting this one woman, we're supporting this entire family, and we're supporting, the DSPs that are working with this woman. And included in that is really changing our perception. So, there's even more context here. And that was the caregiver really was pushing for the use of electroconvulsive therapy. And I know me with my history, I came in and was like, we are not using that. Like that, there's no way that that's going to be our approach with things. Like we have to find a different way. We have to let this guardian know this isn't okay. And really what we found is we followed the data. We supported the guardian's decisions. We said, hey, we're here to support the team. Let's take really good data and see what this looks like. And ECT has been the most effective method in helping to decrease her SIB. And I'll also talk about some kind of other benefits to ECT that we were seeing that we didn't even intend to find. On top of that, really just going back to the guardian has expertise. In this case, as much as there was kind of things that were happening with the guardian that we didn't always agree with or we didn't see eye to eye, that guardian held the most information about this person and had that person's best interest at heart. It might just looked a little bit different than what we intended. But I think kind of going back to those, the main kind of pillars or features of positive behavior supports, and that's really looking at the stakeholders. On top of that, really medical providers, I think we just had to ask for what we needed. I think we always are thinking like, oh, this physician doesn't care about my behavioral data. At one point we were sitting down, I can say with the program manager, Liz Plicknip is on this call, and we're sitting there looking at graphs with him, and he's talking about how to change the data collection and what are some other things we could think of, or asking questions. And I've never been able to kind of work with a provider that way. And I think I realized I don't think I've asked a provider to work with me in that way or work with our team that way. Glove use, my perception originally was those are horrendous. They're, decreasing her quality of life. We need to get rid of them. And really we're looking at, is it really something that she views as aversive, or is there a way for us to really work with her? If she wants them on, she can request them, or is it something that she does find as a comfort item? At the end of the day, really just looking at the wrong variables. Like I said, we weren't really, when I came in, I wasn't looking at, what is quality of life? What is social validity for these, these pieces and what we're going to do. And then on top of that, ethics, and really focusing on, like I said, going back to the features of positive behavior support, what is the long-term outcomes, or are we looking at her life as where she was, where she is, and where she's going? And so, like I said, there were many times where I was like, I don't think I have what it takes to work with this team, or we're not seeing change quick enough, and realizing that, considering the entire lifespan and that there's going to be slow moving change as much as we want it to be quicker. So at the end of the day, we're looking at those graphs, we're thinking it's not successful, but I kind of had to turn around, like I said, and view it. It is very successful. And the work that we've been doing with this entire team has been amazing. So still today, her sleep is still not typical. Her self-injurious behavior is still occurring. We're seeing decreased rates of it, but it is still happening. And because of that, her restrictive procedure is still in place. So I think it's very easy to say, no, I don't think it's successful for viewing it kind of from that initial point that we thought it was going to be. But on the flip side, really her quality of life and the social validity of the changes have been nothing short of impeccable. She's had increased cognition and engagement with the people around her. So really just like even knowing where she's at, engaging with things in her immediate environment. She's requesting, her wants and her preferences. So I have these specific things because they're in my head. I don't even need a slide to remember them because I'll never forget them. Asking staff, I want shrimp, or, hey, let's go. I want yellow shirts. These are things, and working with her when we first, started working with her, she used very little words to communicate. And most of the time it was hard to really understand what she was kind of wanting in that moment. And those were really clear. Processing her trauma, we're hearing her vocalize her emotions. We actually had a meeting that was last Monday now. And her sister let her know when she was with her last time that she looked at her sister and said, this is really hard. So the fact that she's able to feel safe to vocalize how she's feeling and start to kind of process the thing that she's gone through is pretty huge. And really that's what leads to a stable and safe environment. That's kind of what Jody touched on too, like building that rapport, building that trust with her. The staff that are with her every single day are really lending to her quality of life and really letting her feel safe and trust her environment. And then on top of that, really increase social engagement. So because she's feeling safe, because people have taken the time to build trust in her environment, she's now being able to kind of go out and do weekday visits with the people that mean the most to her. They're planning trips to have her go to a family member's house. And like Jody was talking about the spa things, we actually just talked about that. Our director of services was like, why don't we go get her nails done? Wouldn't she love that? So those quality of life and social validity factors are the things that we're now looking at even more to deem this like this. Yes, this is successful. Let's keep going. So I'll kind of end with my big takeaways. And the biggest thing is really, as a clinician, always looking at what are you defining as success? Are you looking at the right variables? And then don't let your own decision-making biases hold you back. So like I said, there was many moments where I was like, oh no, this is what I need to look at. And that was really holding me back from being able to support the team like I wanted to and viewing this as a success. Never forget about cooperation or collaboration, and I'll go a step further and say partnership. Like I said, in supporting this woman, we're continuing to, we're collaborating and partnering with lots of different people. Never forget quality of life. I think that's been my biggest learning since moving from kind of early intensive behavioral intervention to working more in the home and community-based services is really looking at quality of life and what does that mean for the person that you're supporting and the people that they love most. And last, but certainly not least for all of us here that like data and graphs, knowing that progress doesn't always look like progress. When I say that this team would take a step forward and 7 steps back, that's really what it felt like in the moment. We would often say we felt like hamsters in a wheel, but the reality is that's what the work looks like. All right, and that's all I have. And I just put my email up there if anybody has anything. All right.
Thanks, Heather. That was awesome. I just think you did. I always tell teams, if you want to change someone else's behavior, be willing to change your own. And I just think this work is a golden example of that. So excellent job. Thank you so much. Since we did start a little bit late, I'm just going to say we're going to go a little bit over and probably start Steve's talk at around 2:15. But then I'm going to hand it over to Nicole. Nicole, did you want to share your slides or do you want me to share the screen here for you?
If you want to share them on the screen, that would be great.
All right, I can certainly do that. And whoops, I need to share my screen first before I go into slide mode. Here we go. All right.
Perfect. Thank you, Liz.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, I will begin. Again, my name is Nicole Kelly, and I am a board certified assistant behavior analyst practicing in a school setting. And today I'll be sharing Connor's story. So with sharing Connor's story, I'm going to start with a little bit of background information. And on the first slide here, Connor is a student who is served in a federal setting 4, which means that there is no access to general education peers, and all students in this setting are served on IEPs. He receives 2-to-1 staffing, so he at all times has 2 staff with him. He has a history of abuse and also has self-injurious behavior, which looks like headbanging, removing attached medical devices, and choking, and also physical aggression, which looks like hitting, biting, and scratching. So when working with Connor, we knew that some of the skills that we needed to be teaching were giving him the ability to communicate his wants and needs, having to wait for items, being told no is something that we knew that we needed to work on, ending preferred activities, and transitioning, tolerating any error correction or staff correcting any of our mistakes, tolerating undesirable work tasks and instructions, and also cooperating with adult-led instruction. And so with that, on the next slide, some of the treatment considerations that we looked at as a team were we wanted to come up with a plan and a treatment that would be trauma informed given his history. We wanted to teach the essential skills of communication so that he would be able to communicate with us what he wanted and needed, which allows us to strategically listen and make informed decisions on his programming. We also wanted to look at his toleration and his cooperation. Something else that we needed to consider as a team was something that could be implemented with integrity, from whether the paraprofessionals were implementing it, whether I was implementing it, or whether his case manager was implementing the programming. We also wanted to incorporate something that could be implemented throughout the day, as I'll get to soon, as we needed to move to a treatment plan of something that could be implemented across his entire school day. And also treatment that incorporated all of the stakeholders of his team. So it was important to us that Connor could be involved in his planning and of his programming and in his team, speech, occupational therapy, administration in the building, social workers, paraprofessionals, myself, his parents, and as well as his county workers. So with this, we also wanted to move away from removing any privileges that he might have as a consequence as well. And that was an important treatment consideration. So with that, on the next slide, what we had found and discussed as a team would be a good treatment plan for him is something that is called skill-based treatment. And this is a treatment developed by Greg Hanley, and I have information at the end of the presentation for anybody who's interested in that. And kind of just, I'll walk you through a little bit of the process of what this then looked like for us as a team and what it looked like then when we started the skill-based treatment. So our first step was we wanted to verify what led to him engaging in self-injury and physical aggression. And we verified this through informed interviews with his stakeholders. So again, that would be with his parents, with his case manager and paraprofessionals and the people that spend the most time with him. And then the next important step that we had was to determine what happy, relaxed, and engaged looked like for Connor. And what I mean by that is we wanted to know what made him the happiest. And if we could create his best day and he could have the best time here at school, what would that look like? And for him, that looks like laughing and joking with his staff, being able to have access to the computer and being able to read comic books. And this is something that we evaluate every day because we all know that people change their preferences and what they like and don't like. So every day we kind of evaluate exactly what Connor likes and how we can make sure that we can have him have the best, happiest days every day. And then our kind of our obstacle that we were working towards was to be able to get to work. So when work was presented, we taught Connor to shift his communication from engaging in problem behavior to a more functional form of communication. So that instead of physically aggressing, which would look like hitting at staff or at himself, we taught him a response of saying my way. And then when he would say my way, he would then get access back to everything that makes him happy and relaxed and engaged. And the next step would be we prepared him for disappointment, which that would look like where we would tell him that he would not be able to access those things. And then with that, we would deny when he would say my way, and then taught him a response of okay, and giving us a thumbs up so that then we knew that he heard that he couldn't access those items. And then when he engaged in that, we gave those items right back. With that, from there, we were able to build on that and transition to work. And we have systematically been able to increase his work trials. On the next slide, I will kind of go through his results and what that kind of looked like. So as we started the school year, we implemented these skills on the previous page in his morning routine. And we would do that right away in the morning. And then in the afternoons, he would do his other work, which would be a token economy. So that would look like a token board where he would receive tokens. And with that, we found that we were still seeing some of the problem behavior. And there was a little bit of a lack in our communication with him because we weren't then quite hearing his needs because we were still seeing that we were having physical aggression and self-injury. And kind of what you'll see is this is a graph showing the frequency of restrictive procedures or physical holdings, in other words. So we were having up to 5 physical holdings a day. So we decided as stakeholders that we needed to come up with a different intervention in a different way that we could communicate with Connor and listen to his needs and what he needed. So how we did this was we implemented the programming that was going really well in the morning throughout his entire school day. So then what that looked like was throughout his entire school day, we would be implementing where we would present him work. He was able to express to us that he would want to do it his way and keep playing on the computer. We would think about it and no, you have to come to work. He would then come to work and we were able to then decrease the instances of physical holdings to 0. So this was a very effective treatment for Connor. We did then this winter, one of the stakeholders on his team, his parents were concerned that we weren't getting to quite as much work as we would if we were using the tokens. So with that, they had expressed that they would like to try to go back to do the tokens. And what we found was that when we went back to that treatment plan, it increased our instances of physical holdings. And we also found that we actually weren't getting to as much work because we found that then he wasn't able to communicate his needs clearly enough to us. So with that, we re-met as stakeholders, which again included the parents and admin of the building, myself, and re-met with that and decided that we should implement this skill-based treatment in full days. And then what you'll kind of see is that then we were able to go back to having less instances of physical holding. And then on the next slide, we found that we needed a different way to respond to problem behavior when we did see problem behavior. In his past, he has had a plan of where you would remove attention from the behavior if it was safe and give that behavior minimal attention. And what we found is that then we weren't able to best listen to his needs and his wants. So what we've moved towards is validating his feelings. So we kind of keep in our mind that when in doubt, we need to validate his feelings. And the best way that we have found to do this for Connor is that we provide him an empathetic response to some of those pre-crisis behaviors, which might be yelling or a little bit of property destruction. So with that, we say, oh, I'm sorry that you're upset. It looks like you're super frustrated. This is really tough. We encourage him with what he was doing to keep going and provide a prompt and work him through the tasks that he is working on. So that might look like, oh, I'm so sorry you're frustrated. This is a really tough problem. How about I add this part for you? And then as soon as we gain back his cooperation, we reinforce that cooperation and allow him to go back to his choice time. And then we also allow extra time for him until we move on to the next instruction to ensure that Connor is back to that happy, relaxed, and engaged. Because we always keep in our mind, is he happy, relaxed, and engaged? And is he in the best place that he can be? And if we're questioning whether he oh, maybe he's not quite happy yet, then we do not move on to the next task, because then we know that through that communication, then that we would need to give him more time to be able to be back to being happy, relaxed, and engaged. And when responding to his crisis behaviors, we always, again, provide an empathetic response of, I'm sorry, this is tough, or I'm sorry that this is frustrating. We prompt him then with his my way right away, say, oh, you can tell us your way. And then with that, we then provide him access to his wants and needs, and then allow him to have extra time until he's happy, relaxed, and engaged. And we have found through this way of responding with problem behavior that we see less self-injury and less physical aggression when we validate his feelings, provide him that empathetic response of how he is feeling, and then listening to his communication of telling us that he wants to do it his way, and then allowing him access back to those items. And on the next slide, we always keep in mind with our stakeholders that we want to make sure that their opinions are being heard, and that this programming is something that everybody is in agreement with, and that they are feeling is the best for Connor. So with that, here are some statements from our recent social validity survey. And also with this, we also do the social validity survey with Connor as well, and ask him how he's feeling about his programming. And we always ask him before we move on in our programming if he feels as though he's ready. And there's never once been a time when he doesn't feel as though he's ready to keep moving on. Another way that we track progress for Connor is we use a tool called the Behavioral Health Index, which is a measure of specific progress. And this progress ranges from a highly restricted lifestyle, and then rates all the way to what would be an unrestricted lifestyle. And through our empathetic listening and responding throughout programming and the implementation of that, he has actually moved 5 points towards the unrestricted lifestyle since this fall, which has been a huge win for Connor and for the stakeholders. Okay, and then I've also listed any additional resources here. This first website would be a website where you could find any information on the skill-based treatment. And then the bottom is actually a YouTube channel that provides video models of what this programming looks like, if anybody was interested to kind of see how that looks. And I thank you for listening and for your time and for the opportunity to be able to speak on this.
Nicole, this is great work. Such a beautiful systematic approach. I expect to see this in poster format at MNPBS this year, so be prepared to print that out. But I just think you did such a nice job of not just saying, hey, here's our next step, but building on these skills over time. And I just think the assessment of the, the relaxed, happy, and engaged, to me is something that's missing often because we're such in a rush to change the behavior, but understanding that place when he was in a good place, having good documentation of that, giving him a place to get back to with that, I think made a huge difference. So really good work. I love it. All right, I'm just going to wrap it up here before we head off to Stephen, but key points from all these presentations and just alternatives to punishment. Punishment can't stop behavior. You're always teaching something. And I think these are 3 examples of people who took the opportunity to teach something and look at how we could make this person's life better, how we could increase their quality of life, and how we could learn something about that person. I think also increasing positive behavior is more likely to work long-term because it addresses what's important to the person. You know, for Nicole, we were thinking, the parents had asked, can we go back to these consequences? Because we don't think he's getting as much work done. And it turns out that wasn't the case. And so when we're really taking that systematic approach, when we're letting the data tell us what to do, like Heather was working on, we're actually finding that not only are we not having to use consequences to support, to change a person's behavior, but we can actually better support the other things in their life that help them to learn, that help them to grow as a person, when we're taking that time to understand them. And looking at that context uncovers patterns. I think Heather did an amazing job at this, of not just saying, here's my data, here's the things I was collecting on, but here's the things that are amazing and changing about this person. And maybe I should be paying attention to that. And I think that changed how this person's life is going. I think that changes how that whole team is responding to that person. And I just think it's just such great work. And also just this final piece, understanding behavior helps us to listening to what people are trying to tell us. If we're just using punishment, if we're just, applying these consequences, applying restrictive consequences, we're not understanding what's really working for that person. And just like Heather took that questioning, are these gloves something that's actually meaning to this person? What are our other options? If I'm just putting this person in EOMRs, am I taking the time to understand what's meaningful to them, what a good life looks like for them? And all of a sudden, when you do ask those questions, when you do investigate that further, we're finding we're not having to use EOMR. So I can talk about the theory behind this stuff all day, but I just think these examples speak for themselves. And thank you, presenters. You did an amazing job. And thank you to everyone for attending. All right, and I'm going to pass it over to Erin to introduce Steve.
Well, thank you. I really appreciated that last presentation. It's so great to hear what others are doing around the state and how we're supporting people with all of the needs that they have. So I am happy to introduce Steve Wagner. Steve is currently an assistant principal at Sauk Rapids Rice High School. He has also been a statewide presenter for Minnesota PBIS for the past 10 years. It's been great to work with Steve and see how he can help support teams no matter which level they are at, and implementing their PBIS in their school programs. He has done a great job in his own district of bringing together a district team to help get that PBIS consistently implemented pre-K through 12. And he is a data guy, loves to collect data and dig into it and really help people make good database decision makings. So I'm going to pass it over to Steve so he can tell you his story.
Right. Thanks so much, Erin. I sure appreciate it. I apologize about the struggles with the day and not being able to get on. It's, I think, Murphy's Law, adversity, whatever you want to call it. With today is actually our last day of our second trimester. We had the end of lunch coming, and then we had a little bit of a behavior issue between two students, and then the internet went down. So all of that happened between 12:45 and 1 o'clock. So lots of fun with that. So thanks so much, Erin. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about what we're doing here at a district level, as well as kind of bringing it down a little bit further into maybe more of a building level look as far as what we're having here at Sauk Rapids Rice High School, and really bringing it from a large lens then into a smaller lens. And so first and foremost, it's really all about aligning, having alignment from pre-K all the way through the senior high with our programs and initiatives. And who is Sauk Rapids Rice? Well, we're located in central Minnesota, approximately 4,500 students. We have 6 schools, with our early childhood to 3 elementary schools, our middle school, and our high school. So we started a few years ago having our district level team, created our district level team to meet monthly so that we are, again, aligning and able to, bounce ideas off of one another, problem solve together. And coming to that table is Erin Ingdes. And then we have early childhood, all of our elementary schools, our middle school, and our high school represented on that team. And we have just found that it's such an important meeting for us to be a part of, because we get to know what's going on now in every building. We get to, again, bounce those ideas off of one another, and we get to beg, borrow, and steal from one another as well, which are all so very important to be able to do across your district and across districts for that matter. we are, trained in PBIS. We have our teams that have been trained. We were cohort 10 for our elementary schools and middle school way back in 2013 through 2015. Our high school came on board with cohort 12 from 2015 to 2017. And so we continue to work to really grow our brand with what we want in all of our schools. Our elementary schools follow the path. They're prepared, accepting, trustworthy, and honest, where our secondary schools practice their core values, and our core values follow our SRR acronym of school engagement, respect, and responsibility. So PBIS and PBS have very similar, core features as well. But when we're talking about positive behavioral supports, we're really going to dig into stakeholder participation today, systems change and multi-component interventions. And, as I said, district level to secondary and elementary specific, as well as building specific. And then the emphasis on prevention, because we want to be proactive. We want to be in front of as much as we can, especially when we're talking about behavior. All right. And so in the summer of 2018, we came together because there was just some struggles we were having as a district. We just weren't consistent across the district, and we were just really discombobulated. And so we came together because we weren't speaking the same language when we were talking about behaviors. And that's just such an important piece for us. And that's where we sat down and I got to lead the group in creating our district-wide code of conduct. And so that code of conduct is really our guiding force when we're working with students, when we're defining behaviors, when we're, able to bring together really strong data points. And so really an important piece. And I wonder how many of you have a code of conduct in your schools across your district, because this code of conduct is it is district-wide, pre-K through 12th grade. It is different from a student handbook. It's not the student handbook that digs into building specific, rules, guidelines, policies, procedures, but instead this one is district-wide. It talks about your behavior systems. It talks about the systems of supports that are district-wide. It goes through the levels of behaviors per se to kind of be able to put them in line to be able to collect the data on it and then be able to precision problem solve based on those data points. And so I'm wondering if just in the chat, if you guys are willing to throw out there, do you have a code of conduct or something of that nature? I think that'd be really great for me to understand kind of where you're at in your own settings, if you have something along those lines. As you guys populate that, I'll keep going. And so we started our district team then the fall of 2019. We wanted to be sure we either had an admin or we had a team leader or a coach from each school that was really working very closely and very directly with the behaviors in that building. And so we decided to meet monthly. And of course, as I said, we're learning from one another as we go. And so great to see that we have a couple of yeses there, that we do have code of conducts out there. I just think it's so very important to be able to do, to be able to have that document. I do remember when I entered this school district, this is my 22nd year in education, and I entered here 5 years ago. I came from St. Cloud schools, had great experiences there as well, but I came to the Sauk Rapids Rice School District, and it was really hard for me to even do a referral for a student. And so that really led me to dig into what was the process? What was the procedures? What do we do district-wide? And so it was a lot of fun to be able to dig into that. One other little piece I would say about that too is that very often in schools, we hear schools talk about the behavior discipline referrals. And what we've done this year, and I know Aaron knows about that because I talk about it in our trainings that we do, we've changed it from office discipline referrals per se. We've removed the word discipline to that, and instead we've replaced it with an I word as an intervention. So it's all about intervention referrals. It's not about discipline. It's about intervention. It's about teaching and reteaching. Do consequences sometimes follow? Sometimes they do, absolutely. But it's more about the teaching and the intervention and what changes we can make as adults to move forward. So digging into this, we made certain that our early childhood was incorporated in what we were doing. Such a vital time for our students, certainly in early childhood. We definitely wanted them to be a part of this team. They are implementing the pyramid model, which is quite similar to what we do with PBIS, very, aspects of PBS in there as well. But we wanted to be able to have them start seeing what PBIS is all about and see how we can also get that to work in our early childhood here in Sauk Rapids Rice. And we also wanted to be able to transition our early childhood students from that setting into the elementary school setting, into kindergarten, with some of the common practices and common languages to really create that consistency across the two buildings that they're coming from and the one that they're going into. Because we know too that our little ones are going to be pretty anxious coming in, but whatever we can do to create that consistency is definitely going to help them to transition more successfully. And so we actually had our early childhood take the tiered fidelity inventory, part of PBIS, to really start looking at their systems and things like that to make sure that they're moving in the right direction and creating those systems if they're not there. And so that was a ton of fun having our early childhood at the table and learning together and moving forward together. And so we just wanted to make sure everything was relevant and specific for early childhood. So very important, knowing that whatever we do has to meet the students where they're at, whether it's age appropriate, social, emotional appropriate, and so on. And so we were able to meet and go over the tiered fidelity inventory data to take action, our steps to action plan and move forward. And just really their excitement at our early childhood to make the change and move forward is just really awesome. So we're excited about that. But our elementary schools, when we come to the table, they're really able to discuss alignment and they can connect then all of their buildings together to really, again, being able to be consistent and predictable for all of their students. And we always start with a check-in when we come together as a district team and we're collaborating, we're sharing and stealing ideas from one another. Just a lot of fun to hear about what's happening. And we also talk about the struggles that are there as well. And so we're able to bounce some ideas off of one another as far as, maybe some next steps. The accountability piece, meeting district-wide, it's a great piece to provide that motivation to keep the momentum and moving forward, making sure that we're continuing to implement with fidelity, making sure we're continuing the good work that needs to be done. And so, but yet at the same time, we do want each building to have their own unique identity as well. I think that's a really important piece too. But we're always bringing ideas back to one another, speaking the same language in all of our buildings and really being able to continually talk about what we can do as a district from a larger lens to filter that into our buildings. Our middle school is, they've been in some transition from leadership role at the middle school and things, but the PBIS system and that piece kind of fell off to the side, but that's been recently brought back together and really we're working to help them understand a little bit more about how it can fit and how we can work to transition students from elementary school to the middle school. And as I said before, the elementary schools always follow the path: prepared, accepting, trustworthy, and honest. And the middle school now has transitioned away from that. That's initially what the behavioral expectations were, but now they've moved to SRR with our school engagement, respect and responsibility. And so again, another transition piece for the staff in that building, but then it's also preparing what can we do now with our fifth graders to prepare them to move from the path to our core values. And so really working hard to get all of those pieces up and running in our middle school. They've done a nice job of creating some unique incentive and acknowledgement pieces and celebration pieces to work at a building level to support all of our students. And then we collaborate to plan district level training opportunities as well. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. Here at the high school, I think from my perspective, what has been so great about being able to sit down together as a district is we're able to learn about what all of our students, at the high school level have been exposed to. And I think that's so important for us to really be able to understand and continue to create our climate and culture that we're really looking for. For us at the high school, we look to collaborate with the middle school to transition our 8th grade students to the high school, another really important part. And so you probably heard from me, I just said, early childhood transitioning to kindergarten, but we're also pushing really hard to make sure that there's transition talks for elementary students. That's usually K1, 2 are kind of working and growing it there, but then to 3rd grade, there should be a little bit of a transition now. And then 5th grade, obviously for us to 6th grade in middle school, we have 6th through 8th there. So we want to make sure that we're looking at those transition pieces to ensure we're meeting the needs of our students for where they're at. And so again, just our opportunity to share and learn what has worked and what hasn't is just really priceless for us. And you can see on the right, that is our core values that we talk about of school engagement, respect, and responsibility. Building level data use. I think that's really important that we have our building level data use, that, our PBIS team, our Storm Pride team is what we call them. That's our tier 1 group. And we're really looking at that school-wide data. Then we have our student assistance team that is looking at our tier 2 and tier 3 data, really pulling in those students that need, either group or individual support. And then we're always working really hard to ensure that we're sharing that out to our staff at a monthly basis. At least our tier 1 data is for certain to go out to them. So I want to share with you a little bit about what that looks like for us here. And so we did have an in-service day a few weeks ago. And so this is an example of what we do to bring forward to our staff to be able to have those conversations and ensure that we're all on the same page. And so right now, this is what it looks like. So we said, here's for the high school, 443 minor behaviors, 608 major behaviors. Attendance has been a big deal right now. We understand that that's just been a huge struggle as we've been in person all year, but yet students are going out because of COVID-related illness and so many other things. We understand the mental health of our students, the social and emotional pieces it's so difficult right now for our students. It's difficult for our staff as well. And so we know that attendance has been a huge impact. So we always want to talk about, so these are truancy letters being sent out. And I think it's really important to note too, for us here in Benton County, the truancy letters being sent out and the county becoming involved is a bonus, is what we talk about, because we have such a great partnership with our county to, again, support. It's not about, okay, truancy letters are going out, and these students now, we have 38 of them that have a 7-day letter that has gone out. And at 7 days now, the county is going to have a social worker come in and support you. And if you don't do, it's not about punishment. It's again about support. It's not about, the families are so worried when they get a letter that we're going to end up in court or things like that. It's not about that. It's about, once again, finding another way to support. And we're able to share this information with our staff by tracking it. We track our minor behavior intervention referrals. And of course, we track our major intervention referrals. And so I think it's so important for the staff to see that they're doing a great job of tracking these, understanding that our minor referrals are just any behaviors dealt with in the setting by that adult, and that we're not going to be doing anything about that administration wise. The main office isn't going to take that on, but it's just really important data points in ways that we can use that information to support our students. But of course, the major intervention referrals by location, that's where it does come to us. And so you see the other is the number one. And that's like, wow, what does that mean? Well, with attendance pieces, we don't know where they're at. So if they're tardy to school or they're late to school and things like that, so that's where that comes in. And that's a huge signal for us to understand that the attendance piece is big out there. And we continue to work to problem solve and come up with ideas on how to support those students. Of course, by behavior, we see 209. So the tardiness obviously is another part of it. And we know that There's a mental health piece tied to that. There's a social and emotional piece tied to that as well. So we're continuing to look at that. We show our behavior intervention actions as well. I think that's a really important piece because our staff sometimes are frustrated about, well, what's happening right now? What's going on with these students? Granted, we do always close the loop with our referral system to ensure that they see that we've met with this student, here's our action. If we are not able to talk face-to-face, the email always gets sent to them. But I think sometimes there was a struggle at saying that we're not doing enough. So we conference with our students, we teach and reteach with our students, but there are other pieces to understand that there's lunch detention, there is out of school suspension, there are warnings, there is in-school suspension. And so when you look at our top actions that are happening, but we're always looking at the individual, we're always looking at the individual situation as well to make sure we're doing the right thing. Another important piece for us to look at is our average referrals per day. Again, this is another really important aspect to look at the behaviors across across our district, but specifically across each of our buildings to see what's going on. And we can see that, this year has obviously been a little bit different with, higher than average when we compare over a 4-year span. Until we hit November, but then of course January and now February it was quite an uptick, and right now March is as well. March having this trimester transition, we're certainly seeing it out of alignment with what has been happening in what we would say normal years, I guess. As we know that this year is not even near normal, and so we also show what's happening by grade level as well, but I think the really important piece anytime we're talking about sharing any type of data source is that let's be sure that we can celebrate. And I think that that's the biggest piece for us. So for us to celebrate here, we have about 1,400 students in our building that we can say 1,147 of our students are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They're doing a great job with so many things. We have 108 that are in need of some type of support, and we have 22 that really need some direct individual support. So a lot of fun being able to share that data and celebrate the great things that are happening. And it helps us really to realign our focus and kind of shift our thinking at times when we know that the winter months are really a difficult time. It really is. We're so ready for spring to be coming right now that it just can't come soon enough. Another piece that we did is at one of our last district level team meetings, we wanted to bring our information, our data together to see a broad view of implementation, what's working and what's not working, and try to see that through the lens of our data as well, because we wanted to see how consistent and reliable our behavioral data is across each building, and to be able to grow from that and make tweaks if need be. We wanted to see how the teachers are making their referrals. Are we all using Skyward? We want to make sure we're all using our behavior definitions appropriately, and making sure that, is our code of conduct doing what it's supposed to do? And is there anything missing? And so every year we do go back and look at that code of conduct and we make updates. So we bring somebody from every single site to the table to be able to make sure that we are on top of that. And I think the biggest piece here is the bottom one, making sure our data that's coming together has fidelity so that we can precision problem solve, so that we can really dig in and find out, do we need to make any technical changes? Is there a schedule change that needs to take place? Something as simple as that, or do we need an adaptive change? Is there something bigger than that? Is there something that we as adults need to practice and change in what we're doing? Or is there something that we can provide for our students and to work with our students on? And so we did run our district-wide major intervention referrals by location. So it's good to see that the students are in the classrooms and it's not always other everywhere else like it is kind of at the high school. But then our behaviors, so again, quite similar across the buildings, and then our actions as well. So it's great to look at what are those things that are out there, what is similar across our buildings, but then what is also different. And again, let's not forget to celebrate with 4,500 students, to look again at what is really going well. So those are the pieces for the data piece that's so very important, and really want to be sure that we have a strong data source to help guide us in the problem solving and in the decision making. Another great piece of having a district level team is being able to come together. And I know it's so difficult during the school year. I'd love to do it during the school year. So last year we brought all of our teams together in August, and we just wanted to have a time to sit down face to face and learn from one another. And what we did is we trained on our classroom practices as well as our data practices. And it was just a wonderful day to come together and do that. And we really dug into the core features of our classrooms. We really dug into, how do you collect your data? How do you use your data? Are you using data? And what does that look like for you, so that we can all be moving forward in the right direction? And of course, having, small group time to discuss those transitions that I talked about, the preschool, early childhood going into kindergarten, and then among elementary schools from second grade to third grade, and then fifth grade to sixth grade, and again, eighth grade to ninth grade. So that was just really valuable time for us as well. But then just as valuable as giving each of the schools time to action plan for the upcoming school year, and to really sit down and look at their calendar and look at, what do we want to get done? Where do we want to go with this? And what are some of those benchmarks that we can put on our calendars that we want to get done by certain dates as well? And we've already been planning. It went so amazingly well that we're planning that again for this summer, for August of 2022. So just a really cool thing. And if you have the ability to do something like that, I would strongly encourage you to give that a shot. And so again, I think it's really important to be able to look at things from a broad level, from a district lens, and then being able to hone in what's happening in each and every one of your sites in your district. So I know I've just talked a long time at you, but I would love to know if there are any questions or any thoughts that you might have for me, especially when looking at things from those different lenses. You can certainly throw it in the chat or anything you would like to communicate those questions to me. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate it. Again, I apologize about the little bit of a chink in the schedule with me today, but I get it. There's adversity, and we do what we can to roll with it.
It's all right. We're supporting each other with flexibility. Nice job, Steve. Thanks for your flexibility to go a little bit later then too.
Absolutely.
Tim, were you coming back on? Thank you. Yep. So Tim's just sharing the survey. I'll let you talk, Tim.
Sure. I don't have much to say. I just wanted to say thank you again to Steve and to everyone who presented this afternoon and this morning. Just a wonderful day of information, of sharing some compelling stories, and really some stories that really I think caused us all to I think appreciate the honesty in all of them. Some of the stories that were shared were not ripped from the Java headlines with perfect graphs. This was vulnerable sharing. I think a lot of the stories were, hey, this isn't perfect. This is how we problem solve. This is how we collaborate to figure it all out together. Just wonderful to hear it all and to be part of a group discussing it in ways that I think will be instructive to all of us in our work. So thank you to everyone who made this happen today, and for being here, and for being flexible with timing, and for making the effort to get here, and everything that you did. I did post one more time the link to the evaluation, the survey, in the chat. If you could take about 5 minutes to fill that out, it would be really helpful to us to see how this all landed for you, and a little bit about where you're at with regard to measuring fidelity. And that kind of helps us understand year over year how much more a part of the work of our group that's becoming, and to what extent it's related to how useful these sessions are, and how we can create better ones in the future. So please do take the time to fill that out. And it's within that survey that you can request a certificate of attendance if you were able to attend all the sessions today. So please do take the time to do that. By the end of the day, if you could, while it's fresh, would be the most helpful. And we'll close that survey at some point, probably over the weekend or on Monday. Anyone else from the event planning team have any closing words?
I'll just say thanks, Tim, for being the MC and for your leadership. And thank you to everybody who's been a part of it today.
All right. And with that, thank you all, everyone. We'll see you again soon. And maybe if we're lucky, in another year, we'll be back in person somewhere for a Collaborators Forum, and we can be together in person.